Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay, real estate consultant. His website, thewealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Thanks a lot, Jim, for having me back.
The Canadian Real Estate Association is telling us that Canadian prices went up 12.7% over the past year. Is that an accurate number? And is it proper to really announce a national figure when you know real estate is all about location and each local market is totally different than another?
It matters if you know what the number means. So to the average person, the average listener, the average homeowner, those numbers mean nothing. But they don't mean anything really in Vancouver or in Kelowna or in Toronto either. Those numbers really don't mean anything unless you understand what they're saying. They are not selling prices. They are purchase prices. Selling prices creates the illusion that that's what the price, how much my house has gone up in value or down. That is not what the average selling price actually means that the Canadian Real Estate Association or any real estate board releases. They're actually releasing what is the average purchase price paid. Two totally different measures, because there is a quality score of each home that's bought. In other words, in today's market in Vancouver, you're buying a totally different house for $1 million in January of 2017 for your $1 million than you were buying in March of 2016. You were buying a house in Vancouver for $1 million, which is about 20% better than the house you would have been spent $1 million to buy in March of 2016. You still spend $1 million. You're just getting a house that's worth 20% more. This is what skews everyone's opinion on prices, because the real estate boards and associations, the press, the economists, every bank in Canada, CMHC, all pretend it's got something to do with the price of houses. It's not that. It's actually a function of the amount of equity you're carrying forward from your previous home and the amount of debt you're going to take on. Debt is limited, and that's really what causes a housing market to turn. When a population's income can no longer support the market continuing to see the house prices increase, then the market has to reverse, and once the reverse happens, all of a sudden consumer behavior is, oops, we got to get out of here, which is exactly what's going on in Vancouver today. So when you asked me today, did the average price of a Canadian home, actually I think it's about 11.2%, which was reported this week by the Canadian Real Estate Association for all of the year 2016. No, that is a totally different house that you're measuring in December 31st of 2016 than you were measuring in January the 31st. It was especially really different than what you were measuring in March and April, where more of that house was located in Vancouver than it was at the end of the year. So the 12.7% you commented on, that's actually the number for the Greater Vancouver average selling price. So everything, all of the myths that you've heard, all of the stories that you've heard of 20, 30, 40% house price gains, property taxes going up 20, 30, 40%, the people in British Columbia never being told for 365 days of 2016 how much the average selling price was increasing, You just found out this week, because this week the Canadian Real Estate Association finally released their annual 2016 house price comparisons, where you compare end of December 2016 against end of December 2015. And in that case, the people in Vancouver just found out their housing prices only went up 12.7%. They did not go anywhere near what the benchmark price showed them the entire year. They just learned how much they were deceived by the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver in its refusal to publish the average selling price and leaving that to the Canadian Real Estate Association to hide in their data tables for the public. People like myself, I have access to this information daily. But for the general public, the only way you can find it is in the Korea data tables, which are only released once a month. And then you've got to scour around to find them, because the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, they're one of the real estate boards that actually don't publish those charts on their website. You have to go to a real estate board outside of British Columbia to find those releases taking place. So there's really what the problem is. Yes, housing prices, the average purchaser paid about 11.3% more nationwide at the end of 2016 than they did at the start of it. In Greater Vancouver, in other words, the sales reported by the members of the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board, they only increased 12.7%. Everything else you heard was just proven a lie. Everything else that we've been saying on this program now for the entire year was just proven true. The difference is even the numbers that are being released today are actually stale dated by six to 8 months, depending on how the market is functioning at that time. So that 12.7% gain that happened at the end of was recorded for the year in Greater Vancouver is already 6 months old, because as we've told you before, there's actually over a 20% correction that has already taken place. Now it gets interesting. Because at the end of this month, the end of January, the true house price collapse that has taken place in Vancouver, which we recorded way back in September and reported on your show that way, after reporting a couple of months earlier in May that it was coming, has already taken place. And you're going to find out what we told you in September. At the end of January, they're going to be forced to release the fact that housing prices have dropped between 19 and 20% during the month of January of 2017. That's how they're going to frame it. That is an outright deception of the public. This house price decrease was established back in September of last year, and if you purchased a home anytime between about July and the end of December, believing what the real estate board told you, you purchased the single largest investment of your lifetime being lied to. Now, I'm using the word lie on purpose now. The magnitude of this correction that has already taken place in Vancouver is now spreading to the suburbs. As I told everybody in your show, the first thing that happens is Vancouver, and then it cascades out through the rest of the province. That is now taking place. The provincial government is going to lose so much tax revenue from their budget lines, from the lack of real estate sales. The GDP for your province right now appears to be possibly heading towards the negative as early as April. I'll leave that to the economists who actually know something about GDP and that, which I don't. My expertise is housing markets, which economists know nothing about, as all of their charts prove, and their inaccurate forecasts have proved now for decades. I'll leave that about the GDP for them to talk about.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with real estate consultant Ross Kay. How much of our economic numbers are tied up in real estate?
Well, greater minds than mine will tell you it's somewhere around 20%. I think I've heard as high as 23%. What these people don't understand is the cascading effect of a housing market. Now, what I mean by that is I don't know how to explain this. I'll let some kind of an economist explain this when they contact me, and I explain to them what the consequence of falling home prices causes. If your house is not increasing in value, and you are relying and have been relying upon increases in value to allow you to go out and buy other assets, i.e. cars, when housing prices no longer increase, or they don't even increase at the rate they were, that money is no longer available to go out and buy cars. What economists miss, and I've searched for this and I haven't been able to find it, because again, economists don't know how a housing market functions, so then trying to attribute it other economic considerations to the housing market, they've always failed. What I know is that if a new subdivision is built and housing prices go up in that subdivision, because in phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4 of that subdivision, the builder continually increases the values, all of a sudden the cars in the first phase change overnight by the time that phase 4 selling prices hit. And it is dramatic, the change that takes place in a community with cars as a subdivision goes through its stages of house price growth during as each different stage of the subdivision is opened up. So that's just cars. Now we have furniture, we have home repairs, we have landscaping, we have fences, we have all the ancillary costs associated with home ownership, which, as we've said in the show, account for about 1.6% of the value of the nation's housing stock each year. Even maintaining your home is not possible at times when a housing market is correcting, because you can't go borrow the money to put on the new roof, because all of a sudden you've been caught where your house isn't worth enough for the bank to lend you any more money at your current income level. Now you can't put the roof on and you get a leaky roof. That's when people start selling their own houses because they can't afford to keep them up. It's got nothing to do with them making their mortgage payments. They could continue to make the mortgage payments. Where they're caught is they're not able to borrow the money to keep renewing the property at the point to the level that it's currently depreciating at. In other words, what it's falling apart, whether it's windows or roofs or bathrooms or whatever. They're not able to update it, and this has got something to do with house prices. And so it all works within a bubble. Kind of funny use of a term, a housing bubble, but it all functions inside the bubble, and any bursting of the bubble impacts the entire ecosystem that supports the home ownership market supports. So this is huge. I mean, as I said in the show before, you have already lost over $200 billion worth of net worth out of British Columbia. British Columbia homeowners are now worth over $200 billion less than they were in May of 2016. $200 billion. That is a staggering number. It's unfathomable how large it is. You need someone more educated than I am in the economy, not housing, the economy, to make comment on that.
You'll notice the BC government is running a lot of ads on television telling us how good the BC economy is, the best in Canada. Do these numbers take the wind out of those ads?
It's going to take the winds out of the ads as the campaigning is hitting. 2 weeks from now, after the end of the month hits, you've got a 20% house price correction recorded across the province, in Greater Vancouver. 20% correction. A North American record. So the record we told you about back in September finally gets reported here in Vancouver 6 months later. That is a record. They as we said in your show before, they've been taking credit for foreign buyer tax, which had nothing to do with this correction. Zero. This correction is simply a result of the foreign buyers stopping to purchase ultra-luxury class homes when the Ponzi scheme, in other words, the scheme that we explained was being used to get their money out of China, no longer worked. The fundamentals no longer work to allow it to happen. You might have did a show earlier where you talked to the lawyer from the States where we gleaned some of our information about foreign buyers. That is simply true. So the BC Liberals have been taking credit for the foreign buyer tax. Then all of a sudden they were showing, look, housing is getting more affordable because the prices are dropping. Oops, now all of a sudden, we're not talking more affordable, we're talking about a 20% house price correction. And that's at the start of the election. By the time they get through this, the way the market is structured, you could be seeing a 30 to 35% recorded drop in people's net worth because of falling home prices. You were talking about people who were planning on retiring, who if they had listened to us, if they had been our clients back in May, when we explained the housing market was correcting and what was ahead, this is the price drop that you're going to see, they could have cashed out. They could have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars extra out of the market. But because they listened to everybody else, Canadian Real Estate Association, Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, all the real estate agents, all those real estate agents who think they know about housing markets, who are misleading the public as they appear on Global News, CBC, CTV, run their blogs, their YouTube channels, they're all lying. They're lying because they don't know what they're talking about. And to me, if you don't know what you're talking about, but you pretend you are, it's a lie. All of those people are going to be proven wrong because they don't know how a housing market functions. And that's happening as the BC Liberals are hitting the polls. Exactly as we have repeated on your show now, I think about 8 or 9 months.
Will the BC government bringing in a $37,500 first-time home buyer sweetener package, is that going to be a factor in real estate?
It's going to be a factor to those who are going to buy anyway. So we have members who are going to purchase a home in Vancouver or in British Columbia at some time during the next 2 to 3 years. They're going to buy the home when we give them the buy signal. Because then they know they're not going to lose $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000 following the advice that real estate agents give them. They're going to wait till that market hits. Now, in the first-time buyer category, you're looking at, I think it's $675 is the max for that grant. This is it's been mischaracterized. Number one, has a single bank in British Columbia came out and told home buyers that they will allow a second mortgage to be placed on the property in order to allow them to get this grant. I don't think there has been one news story where a bank has come out and said, yes, we will do this. Number two, has one reporter in British Columbia interviewed CMHC and asked CMHC, are you changing your mortgage lending rules to allow a second mortgage to be registered on a CMHC CMHC insured property at the time of closing? In other words, CMHC knowingly is going to allow a second mortgage to be registered on closing? I don't think so. The reason I'm going to go further. I know they haven't. Not one reporter has researched this. Because if they did, CMHC would have reported back, oops, sorry, we can't do that. Or CMHC would have said, we're going to change the policy to allow it to happen. The mortgage contract that you sign with the mortgage insurance states that you're not going to register a second mortgage on the property at 95.5. You're not going to do it. There is no bank in Canada who would allow that to happen because they would have underinsured the property. In other words, they would have acted deceptively to have a lower CMHC fee. Has one news report in British Columbia talked about the difference between CMHC fees when with this second mortgage interest-free 5-year loan from the government being recorded as a second mortgage? I don't think so. All of these people who claim to know something about the home ownership market, governments, sales reps, sales boards, real estate boards, banks economists, housing analysts, housing experts, all these people who claim to know something about the housing market, not one of them has stepped up to say what I just said. We've waited months because we knew that they didn't know. We know there is not one competent person in the housing market in Canada unless they're working with our firm. And we were just proven right. Supposedly, there is an under request for these loan applications. That was reported on BNN today. Well, who wants to buy a house when housing prices are correcting? What realtor in their right mind, ethically, could sell somebody a home knowing the home is going to be worth the day after they bought it? Well, we know that's how realtors work, and we know that they're spouting off that you should keep buying houses. We know that all that's going on. But you've got to ask yourself, a young first-time buyer starting out in their journey for home ownership, they're going to own a home for hopefully the next 40 years. Hopefully they're going to listen to my firm. They're going to become wealthy homeowners, and they're not going to own it in the foolish way that people have owned in the past because the silence has been broken. What's going to happen to those people? Do you really think it's fair? The government of British Columbia is encouraging innocent first-time buyers to go out and buy a home as housing prices are falling. I think the ramifications from this are going to be historical at your election. I don't know who's in your opposition out there or what party is set to fill in the blank after their current party gets hammered. But this is historical. This is absolutely insane. It is insane. Asking first-time buyers to acquire debt knowing that what they're buying is going to be worth less the next day. And that's what exactly is going on in BC right now.
How big of a drop do you see, and when will it end? When will markets become positive again?
Well, the cascading effect of a house price correction, Jim, there have not been enough of them for a blanket statement to be made. In other words, the corrections that have happened have really been corrections. They haven't been a full crash. The only crash that I was involved in was the one of the 1990s, and it was the biggest in Canadian history, next to the Depression. I can't comment about the Depression. I don't know if housing prices were actually tracked properly back then. I don't have data for that far back. But what I know is that when a housing market turns, it turns at a different time, turns on a different month. The reason that it turns is caused by different reasons. But what I do know is that the magnitude of damage done from loss of net wealth is devastating. So if you were a BC homeowner, specifically Greater Vancouver, just because it makes my answer more dramatic. And so I'm being honest. This is more dramatic, folks. Greater Vancouver, you're talking about a 20% reduction already. That was a done deal in September. That 20% was lost. Now, if you owned a $1.5 million property and you've lost 20%, it was only $300,000 is gone. If you owned a $2 million house, it was $400,000. Those are real numbers. Can you imagine somebody losing $300,000 in the stock market and they laugh about it? People losing 20% of their stock market. It would be in headlines across every newspaper around the world. Canadian stock market drops by 20%. Nobody hears anything. The housing market has already corrected that. It was corrected way back in September. Silent. Now, we were right in our May call. We were right in our September call, because you're going to find that out in the next 2 weeks. Guess what's on the horizon? Guess what June's house prices look like, folks? June's house prices are way worse than what you're going to hear in a couple of weeks. June's prices are way worse because the magnitude of the house price correction is going to increase. It is unavoidable. These little tiny corrections that Royal LePage said that, prices are going to drop in BC by 8.7%. That's just, it's nuts. Vancouver may see double-digit decreases. It's nuts. It's impossible. The Canadian Real Estate Association, on December the 15th, they released year-end house prices. So on December the 15th, 2016, they released their forecast for December the 30th. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. They released the forecast for 2 weeks. They were out by all of the numbers on a 2-week forecast. They can't even forecast 14 days out and be right. They were out on the national number by $1,000 over 14 days. $1,000 over 14 days. In other words, if you took that across the whole year, that's a $25,000 difference if they made that forecast, adjusting each time. That is how nuts this situation is. And people are believing and continuing to listen, and the press is continuing to publish all of this nonsense. We have the numbers. We have the data. It's been recorded here on your show. It is irrefutable. You can go back and check every single one of the issues.
Ross, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
My guest has been real estate consultant Ross Kay. His website, thewealthyhomeowner.ca. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.